Does anyone else feel like they know the model well enough to have a go at drawing it up? Or no, that's a silly question. That's a silly question. Okay, this model is well tried and tested. It was developed by a guy called Richard Boyatzis, who's a hardcore management development theorist based at one of the big universities in the States, can't remember which one. And he developed it, but he's really about management performance, very hard-nosed, outcomes, numbers, and all that sort of stuff. He developed it with a guy called Daniel Goleman, who was Mr. Emotional Intelligence and relationships and all that sort of stuff, and a woman called Annie McKee, who was very interested in high-performance coaching, particularly of senior-level staff. And they were coming up with some limitations around existing sort of models for development and learning, so they decided to come up with a new one. And I've been using it for a number of years now, and it works pretty well. And we've been using it in progress. It's sort of the only thing that sort of defines, what doesn't even define progress, but is consistent about progress, is this model and this way of thinking about how we develop the next phase of our lives. The model starts off with some sort of notion of ideal. It says, if you're going to pursue progress, if you're going to try and move into a phase of life that's going to be better for you, you better have some idea of what that looks like. You ought to have some inkling of the direction in which progress lies. Could be that it's absolutely crystal clear, you know precisely what you want to do, be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, running an empire, an apprentice style, or it might be much more fuzzy. Or one of the guys in Hull last week just confessed to he had like a mini bucket list. His ideal was just someone that would be a drummer in a rock band, would be this, would be that, would be that. There was no coherence, there was a whole bunch of experiences he was going to go for. And by God, he was going for them. He was really just ticking them off. And it was interesting because he was saying, perhaps I should have a more coherent ideal. Perhaps there should be a me that I'm trying to run all these different. No, it's fine to play with lots of different aspects of that. But some notion really with the ideal of in which direction does progress lie. And the lovely line that someone gave me a few weeks back was to say, it's really about seeing the vision of you in the vision. So you see how you want things to be, and can you really see yourself in it? So, Boyatzis would argue that we need to spend a bit of time reflecting on, what would the ideal Ben McKenna look like? What would the lifestyle be like? What sort of a dad would you be? What sort of a partner would you be? What sort of a business person would you be? What sort of a sports person? All that sort of stuff. How would it be to be better? So then Boyatzis said, this isn't the most radical bit of the diagram. I can almost hear you thinking, yes, so what, Mike? This isn't the most radical bit. This is fairly bog standard. He then said you also need to be pretty self-aware about the current reality and be open to what you really like about the situation in the here and now, but also what the points of pain are. And I think one of the things that Boyatzis says is that actually we're pretty good at kidding ourselves that things that actually are incredibly painful aren't painful at all. It's like what you were saying, Ross, about not feeling like a natural bureaucrat. You kind of convince yourself that's not a problem because it pays the salary, and I think we all do that, don't we? We all accommodate into situations. And one of the stories that they tell is this story of the boiling frog. If you put a frog in cold water and just heat the water up very gently, the frog will stay there quite happily until it finally boils to death. Whereas if you took the frog and dumped it in hot water, it would just jump out because it knew that was bad stuff. And I think a number of us become boiling frogs because we're really not that in touch with the reality of the situation, what it's doing for us. In fact, the last person that I met who seriously wanted to be a screenwriter was absolutely a boiling frog because they were earning millions by doing property development over on the East Coast. And very, very miserable person. He was just about to buy a McLaren F1, having already bought a Lamborghini and a Porsche or something. And he was doing this property development, employing 400 people, making shed loads of money, and all he wanted to do was write a screenplay. But he couldn't write a screenplay because what would happen to the 400 people he employed? And so he was miserable as sin there. But he had £250,000 that he could use to solve that problem out, which was nice. But this point of the boiling frog thing, when does what looks or feels like progress actually become a progress trap, actually gets to a place where we'd rather not be? How do we undo some of that stuff? So some sort of tension there between the ideal and the real. They then talked about the need to really be clear on two things. The first is a set of strengths. Well, maybe a set, maybe just one. Now, what's really important to get across it is that a strength is not necessarily something you're good at. Sometimes things you're good at end up trapping you. And the NHS is the classic for this. If you go into the NHS as wanting to do management, and they find out you're good at numbers, they'll train you to be an accountant. And before you know it, you're a financial manager in the NHS. Before you know it, you're an assistant finance director, and you're trapped as the bean counter. And it pays well, and you've got a professional accreditation, and you're part of that clique, but you're not kind of where you want it to be. So something that you're good at has actually been a weakness, because it's been used to lure you into an area you'd rather not be. So a strength is, in this model, is something that you've already got going in your life, something that you've already got moving for you. Maybe not brilliantly, but it's started, that would also be there in your ideal. So, you know, I am now 6 weeks into learning the ukulele. I still think the ideal me would be a ukulele player. I'm a rubbish ukulele player, but it's a strength. The fact that I'm picking it up most nights, having a little strum, learning a few chords, it's a strength. I'm rubbish at it, but it's a strength. If I was training to be an accountant, that would not be a strength. That would be a mistake. So the strengths are only defined relative to where you're trying to get to, which is why you have to have some answer, perhaps, to this question of in which direction does progress lie, or what are the things I want to do. The other thing that Boyatzis and his pals talked about then was the notion of gaps. And a gap is something that you feel that you have in you, an ability, a potential, an unfulfilled something that you haven't really started to develop yet. It's just not going in your life yet. So you said you want to be a writer. You are a writer? Yes. Okay, so that's a strength rather. But it would be a gap. And my guy over on the East Coast, it was a gap because he knew he had a screenplay in him. He just wasn't doing any writing. He was spending 16 hours a day making shitloads of money, doing property development. Hadn't started to write at all. So it was a real gap for him. He knew it was in there. At least he felt it was in there. Hadn't found a way of bringing that out yet. So again, a gap isn't something you're good or bad at. It's just something that you haven't got in your real life yet that would be in the ideal. Yeah? So it's very, very different to strengths and weaknesses. Then talked about a learning agenda. I can send you all this stuff in proper, neat, tight words and everything that we're about catching hold of it. Learning agenda, two things. First of all, it's a state of mind. So it's a willingness to be curious all the time and to be reflecting and thinking about, oh, that's interesting, what do I do differently, how do things change? Which contrasts with a performance agenda, which is an agenda when you say, you know what, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get through my script, I'm going to deliver my spiel, and I'm going to leave. And if they take it or leave it, who gives a damn? So it's actually, it's just about you doing your stuff. That will be the performance agenda. The learning agenda is you doing your stuff and reflecting deeply on it. So again, if you're selling double glazing on the phone, I recommend you go into a performance agenda. Otherwise, it could be very, very depressing. But if you're trying to work out how to make progress in your life, learning agenda, a space to reflect, to think, to change. The other thing about a learning agenda, though, as well as a state of mind and sort of an attitude of openness, is one that says, I've got a shopping list of experiences, of learning events, of things that I'm going to do, because they'll either help me develop my strengths, or they'll help me maybe open up, start to develop the gap. So on my learning agenda sort of 6 weeks ago was getting hold, well, it was going to be getting hold of a cello, but that was far too expensive, so it became getting hold of a ukulele. Got the ukulele, got the book, got someone to give me a lesson. I'm working through this list of experiences. I mean, there's a chance, some months from now, in fact, the whole people are going to make me take my ukuleles and they come and play a song, so it could be. So you see that, the learning agenda is about a set of things that you're going to do. It's a set of planned experiences you're going to make happen. So over here, we're all reflective and thinking and analysing. Over here, we're shit. So I'm actually going to go and do this stuff, am I? It's a shopping list of experiences. I was working with a young woman down on the south coast who was saying that the ideal her would have much more credibility and impact. The real her was pretty good, she knew her stuff, but she just couldn't persuade people. One of her gaps was influence, impact, credibility. Her learning agenda was to spend time with people that had it, work out how they did it, read books on it, just gen up on how you become more influential if you're working in government and business support. So she had a big learning list there of things that she was going to do. Out of the learning agenda must come, in this model, experiments. An experiment is something you're going to do differently to what you would normally do, with no degree of certainty about what the outcome might be. So it's quite a playful thing. You're going to go and do something you'd never normally do because you've done enough learning to make you feel that you can give it a crack. So me pulling out the ukulele the first time in front of the kids and playing a C chord, that was an experiment. And the reaction was interesting, and it continues to be so. But again, this is about the very, very pragmatic stuff of saying, in what way am I going to do stuff differently next week? in pursuit of trying to close this gap between real and ideal. So the structured list of experiences and things we're going to make ourselves do ties back to the courage thing, ties back to the discipline thing. Seem to prefer a bit of that coming from this corner of the room. Actually saying, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. This is when I'm going to do it. Da, 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 da. And again, one of the things behind Progress School was that and a few of you have said it to me, you've been kind enough to give me feedback on why you bother coming, is because you actually feel like, at least here, if you say it, there's some so-and-so might just hold you to account. Might just say, have you done it yet? You know, either put up or shut up. So again, part of the process here is to sort of give people the support to actually experiment and make some stuff happen. Fourth thing then in this model was around practice. And this is really about recognising that some of these experiments will show signs of early promise. You know, the first time I picked up the ukulele, it felt like fun. It put a smile on my face. It was entertaining, for me at least, not for the kids. So I kept going. And with the experiments that work for you, you just keep experimenting with them until they become a part of who you are. They become a part of your identity. They become a part of your practice. So this is both practice in the sense of keep doing it, but also practice in the sense of it just becomes second nature. It would no longer be strange to me. It's what I do. I pick up ukuleles and play them. Other experiments will not work at all, and you may decide not to put them into your practice. And I think I've told a few of you the story about this young woman who did the work on becoming more credible, recognised that a lot of the women that had a lot of credibility in government circles dressed a certain way. They weren't particularly feminine. They weren't particularly relaxed in the way that they presented themselves. They had big shoulder pads. They had gold chains on their handbags. You're doing wrong, guys. Gold chain on your handbag. You know, had this certain persona, very buttoned up, and she went from dressing in a really quite relaxed and open way to really quite a buttoned up way. And by God, it worked. People started taking it seriously. Was she prepared to bring that into her practice? Actually, no. Over a period of time, that was just too big a price to pay. So she knocked that experiment ahead and came back and said, are there other ways? You know, can you be influential without playing the conventional game? So, you know, this relationship between experiment and practice, I think, is quite interesting. And in theory, that then closes the gap on the idea. Two other bits in the diagram that are just worth thinking about, that they really recommend you need to think about. They really recommend that learning is a social process. You can't do it on your own, or it's bloody hard to do it on your own in isolation. You actually need other people to give you feedback, to help you bounce ideas around, to help you think through what your learning agenda might be. You know, learning comes from conversation. It's a relational thing. And what they were saying in the model is, for goodness sakes, find someone to help you with this whose only interest is in helping you become the person you want to be. They have no other vested interest. So they are not your line manager who wants you to be the kind of person that they want you to be because it will tick their numbers. They're often not a spouse, because spouses quite often have a particular idea of the role they want you to be in. This is someone who is completely free of any value judgment about what you want to become. They're just there to help you become it. So again, part of my idea from Progress School was trying to help people find a few people that could play that role in each other's lives. And I mean, some of your work, the co-coaching work, must be almost exactly about trying to find someone in your life to whom you can say anything and they won't judge you and they won't. So that's, again, part of what we're going for there. And then they said, but also there's another bunch of people that we can think about who sit outside of the circle, if you like, and they're looking at us. And they have ideas about what the ideal us should be, and they have ideas about what the real us should be, and they give us their feedback on how you need to change. So they may say, oh, you need to dress more smartly, you need to be more influential, you need to get here on time more often, you need to work harder, you need to sell more, you need to buy less, you need to... You know, they've got their take on who you should become, but it's not necessarily your take on who you should become. So, you know, when the training manager in the NHS says, Mike, you're good with numbers, you should learn to be an accountant, you need to say, do you know what, no, that's not really part of my ideal, thank you very much. Keep pottering away in HR or do what. So it's that ability to, you know, with these people that are outside of our circle, to decide what of that we give sanction to, we work on, and what of that we say, you know what, no thank you. I hear what you're saying, but no. And again, I guess you'll all recognise people out there in your lives who are trying to shape you, and you may or may not recognise people in here. Any questions, any comments, any observations? I mean, some of you have been mucking about with this model for a week or a month or